The phrase, "there was evening and there was morning, a third day," is found in the book of Genesis in the Bible and is part of the creation narrative. Here's a detailed explanation in English. In the biblical creation account found in the book of Genesis, this phrase marks the conclusion of the third day of creation. The creation narrative in Genesis describes how God formed the world in 6 days. Each day is marked by a distinct creative act or series of acts. On the third day, according to the narrative, God continued to shape the earth and prepare it for life. Here's a breakdown of the events of the third day. Separation of land and water. The narrative begins with God commanding the waters under the sky to be gathered to one place, allowing dry ground to appear. This marks the separation of the waters from the land, creating distinct realms of land and sea. Naming of land and seas. God names the dry ground, land, and the gathered waters, seas. This act of naming signifies God's authority and ownership over creation. Creation of vegetation. Following the separation of land and water, God commands the land to produce vegetation, including seed-bearing plants and trees bearing fruit with seeds in them. This marks the introduction of plant life to the newly formed land. Assessment of creation. After each creative act, God evaluates his work and sees that it is good. This underscores the perfection and harmony of God's creation. The phrase, "there was evening and there was morning, a third day," serves as a literary device within the narrative, marking the completion of the third day's creative activity. In the Hebrew mindset, a day is considered to begin in the evening and end in the morning. So, this phrase indicates the passage of time within the narrative framework. Overall, this phrase captures the rhythm and progression of the creation account, emphasizing both the completion of each day's work and the anticipation of the next stage of creation. It's a poetic way of describing the orderly unfolding of God's creative plan. Evening and morning. In the Hebrew culture and in the context of the creation account in Genesis, a day is understood as beginning in the evening and ending in the morning. This is in contrast to the modern understanding of a day beginning at midnight. So, each day of creation is bookended by evening and morning, signifying the completion of a cycle of time. Symbolism of evening and morning. The use of evening and morning not only marks the passage of time but also symbolizes the beginning and end of darkness. Evening represents the initial state of darkness or formlessness, while morning signifies the emergence of light and order. This symbolism reinforces the theme of God bringing order out of chaos and illuminating the world with his creative power. Numerical pattern. The repetition of the phrase, "there was evening and there was morning," at the end of each day's description creates a rhythmic pattern within the narrative. This pattern emphasizes the structured nature of God's creative process and serves as a literary device to organize the passage of time. Cyclical nature of creation. The phrase, "a third day," indicates the completion of the third stage of creation. Each day brings forth new elements of the created world, building upon the work of the previous days. The cyclical structure of the narrative highlights the interconnectedness and interdependence of all aspects of creation. Spiritual symbolism. Some interpretations of the creation narrative see deeper spiritual symbolism in the progression of days. For example, the third day's emphasis on the emergence of land and vegetation may symbolize themes of stability, fertility, and sustenance. It can also be interpreted metaphorically as the growth and flourishing of spiritual life. In summary, the phrase, "there was evening and there was morning, a third day," encapsulates the passage of time, the rhythm of creation, and the orderly unfolding of God's creative plan. It invites reflection on themes of light and darkness, order and chaos, and the ongoing process of bringing forth life and beauty in the world.